Hi, this is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. Today's podcast will be entitled Adventures in the Solar System. I've had a number of requests now for some of my adventures. I have quite a number of them, and I think what I'll do here is I'll try to put them into categories so that these experience podcasts have some semblance of order. So, adventures in our solar system. Well, let's start with one of my most favorite things to do, and that's just orbit the Earth. And yes, I orbit the Earth because it is fairly round. Sorry, flat earthers. This I do purely for enjoyment. I like to make believe that I'm a satellite. I know that sounds juvenile. And I enjoy going faster and faster and faster as I orbit around our beautiful blue-green world. Number 2, one of my trips to the moon was quite interesting because I encountered an abandoned moon base there. Now, I didn't time travel this time because I wanted to make sure I was in present time. I took off, the destination being the moon, but I traveled much too fast, so I overshot the moon. When I stopped, I looked back, and the Earth and the moon were just tiny little dots, so I had to backtrack. When you travel in the astrals, controlling your speed, especially when you're in space, can be challenging. The speed of light is not a barrier, not in the astral. So, as I backtracked, I looked for a spot to land, and I was on what's called the dark side of the moon, because it never faces the Earth. I saw a little bit of a shining area that attracted my attention, so I landed near that particular spot. When I landed, I found something quite interesting. It seemed to me that it was the remnants of a long ago destroyed base on our moon. I would say, based on the absence of any experience, that it was probably destroyed by some sort of an explosion and not a meteor. A meteor, I imagine, would leave a large, somewhat circular crater. But this base seemed to be shattered in a radius that was, say, somewhere around 130, 140 degrees, as if there was some sort of an explosion that then projected the detritus out in a particular cone, if you will. I was surprised not to see as much metal as I expected. When I think of a moon base, I think of a lot of metal buildings. And I did see some metal, even though everything was covered with heavy dust. But what I really saw was a lot of broken adobe-like buildings, as if someone found a way to use moon material and some water to actually construct buildings. I found one shard of metal that seemed to have a type of pictorial writing on it, perhaps a hieroglyphic of sorts. It reminded me of Egyptian hieroglyphics, but I don't believe it was exactly that. So, what was the origin? Unfortunately, when I have these experiences, I usually leave with as many questions as I get answers. So, was this alien? Possibly. Was it some sort of a past advanced Earth civilization that's long gone, destroyed by some flood or disaster in the past? I don't know. We can only speculate. My next experience was a few years back, and I heard that there was going to be a near Earth crossing asteroid. Now, when I say near, when NASA says near, they mean relatively near. This thing was still far away from the moon, but when I traveled to it, and it appeared to me to be a type of misshapen peanut, I could see the Earth and the moon in the distance. So it was probably closer than we would like. I would say the size of it was approximately the size of a football stadium. And I was shocked to see that it was rotating end over end. When I saw the picture in the paper, of course, it was just this blurry, rocky peanut type object, and you just never think, at least I don't, of it actually moving. And when I got there, it was going end over end, and I landed on it and started thinking to myself, wow, this is probably the coolest ride that a human can be on. And there's no one here to see me on it, and there's no way I can get a picture taken of me on the wacky space peanut ride. I stayed on that for a few minutes, and I was silently glad that I'd left my physical stomach far behind, because I can imagine I would have gotten quite ill with all this end over end spinning that I was doing. Another trip that I would like to share with you, I call riding around Saturn. Now, this was prompted not only because, as an amateur astronomer as a kid, I was fascinated by the planet Saturn, but I'd also been reading about Enceladus. And Enceladus, in case you don't know, is one of the moons of Saturn. It's about 500 or so kilometers, or 310 miles in diameter, and it is covered in very reflective water ice. There is actually liquid water on Enceladus, which makes it a very, very, very particular, singular object in our solar system, other than Earth. Of course, the reason why this water is still liquid underneath many miles of ice is the tidal friction from Saturn creates heat, and this heat helps to keep a liquid ocean warm enough to stay liquid. Earth scientists speculate that possibly, if there's life in our solar system, that it might be found somewhere in this under ice sea of Enceladus. So not only did I want to check out Saturn, but I wanted to see if I could discover life on Enceladus and perhaps be the first human to prove that life exists outside of planet Earth. So I took off for Saturn, found it fairly easily. And once I got there, rather than heading right for Enceladus, I decided to hop on one of the dirty ice mountains that were in the rings, or make up the rings of Saturn. When we see Saturn in our astronomy texts or on pictures from NASA, the rings look solid. So the first time I saw them up close, I was shocked, even though I shouldn't have been, because I should have known that these rings aren't solid. They only appear solid to us from Earth because they're so far away. They're actually made up of a wide variety of sizes of dust, and rock, and water ice, and every other kind of material that you can think of that might be floating around our solar system. So I rode this ice mountain around Saturn for a bit and just marveled at Saturn. And when I say it filled the sky, Saturn was the sky. I mean, it was this enormous, enormous, beautiful, celestial body that just took my breath away. I imagined that it made me feel much like I would feel if I walked into an ancient religious chapel where many sacred things had occurred. It just took my breath away, even though I remember laughing to myself that I didn't actually have any breath at the time. I also noticed, which is probably one of the reasons why I stayed a little bit longer than I should have, was that if you adjust your vibrations just right in the astral, you can hear Saturn sing to you. And it's marvelous. It's like tuning into a radio station where there's this marvelous music. It reminded me a little of whale songs, but it was this unearthly melody that just, I'll go to my grave remembering that sound. Well, I suddenly remembered after chilling on this Saturn rock for a while that I had actually gone there to check out Enceladus. So I went around to the different moons trying to find it. It was fairly easy to find because it was very reflective. I went and I landed on the ice and knew that I had to drill down deep through the ice to get to the water. Unfortunately, just as I thought that thought, I felt my return signal. Remember, I had not gone into the future, I stayed in the present. And when you're in the present, you only have a handful of minutes to explore. Maybe 15, maybe 20 physical minutes. And that doesn't sound like a lot. However, you can accomplish an awful lot in the astral at the speed of thought with that amount of time. But I was pulled back and I never got to dive through the ice and into the waters of the sea under the ice in Enceladus. So perhaps in the future I can go back and I'll reveal to you whether I found life or not. Those are just a few of my solar system adventures. I have many more. I also have many more tales about space travel and time travel that we'll talk about in the future. If you liked this podcast, please hit the like button, subscribe, and smash that bell button because that way you'll be notified every time I post a new podcast. Thanks a lot, everybody, and happy travels.